Welcome to Encounter Wargaming. Today we're going to continue our talk on Psykers. In the last couple of videos we attempted to explain why and how Psykers exist, as well as listed the various types of Imperial Psykers. Today we're going to go through the various types of alien Psykers and how they differentiate, not only from each other, but also from human Psykers. As usual, I'm Jay, and this is Warhammer 40k Metaphysics 101. Psychic powers are an integral part of the metaphysical concepts we encounter in the Warhammer 40k mythos, especially since psychic abilities is how the warp makes its way not only into the physical universe of 40k, but also onto the tabletop. As we covered in past videos, these Psykers come in all shapes and sizes. Humanity makes use of many different kinds of Psykers across their galactic empire. Today we're going to continue to demonstrate the variety of types that these powerful beings manifest in by discussing the various types of Xenos Psykers. Many alien races in 40k make use of psychic abilities, just like humanity does. Due to psychological and cultural differences, though, these Psykers are very different than human Psykers in many ways. So without further ado, let's get into it. Aeldari Psykers. To kick this off, I wanted to take a look at Aeldari Psykers first. This is mainly due to the fact that the Aeldari are an incredibly psychic race, so much so that every member of their species is technically a Psyker. I say technically because some are more capable than others. There are those of their species that are very powerful indeed, even compared to the Psykers of other races. As was mentioned earlier in this series, it would seem that older sentient races have a much larger psychic potential than younger sentient races. Since the Aeldari are one of the oldest races in the galaxy, this makes them incredibly powerful Psykers. This also makes them much more attractive to demons and the gods of chaos than many other races. So let's categorize the types of Aeldari Psykers and describe them one by one. Warlocks. Warlocks usually start as Aeldari aspect warriors that show great psychic potential. Upon discovering their heightened abilities, they turn from the path of the warrior to the path of the seer. Warlocks usually possess more defensive abilities as opposed to offensive, but are quite good at divination and telekinesis. Aeldari Warlocks are usually fielded as leaders of units of Guardians on the battlefield due to their intense warrior training, as well as their extreme level of mental discipline. They can also form units of their own, which are generally fielded as bodyguards for the Craftworld's Farseers on the battlefield. Farseers. Farseers are exponentially more powerful than Warlocks, due not only to a lifetime of study, which in Aeldari terms is literally centuries, but also because they have developed a level of discipline that no human could ever even dream of matching. These powerful Psykers lead Aeldari war hosts on the battlefield. They are capable of shaping the outcome of battle in favor of the Aeldari, usually due to a powerful capability of divination, as well as the ability to change the course of destiny itself through subtle manipulations of the psyches of the enemy, as well as the enemy communication networks, which are usually psychic in nature. Spirit Seers. Spirit Seers are basically Warlocks and or Farseers in pretty much all aspects. Much like how Warlocks take on specific roles as squad leaders or as bodyguards for the Farseer, the Spirit Seers provide guidance for the Craftworld's Wraith constructs like Wraithguard, Wraith Lords, and Wraith Knights. Without the Spirit Seer, the Wraith constructs have a hard time on the battlefield since they cannot really see things in the conventional manner as we do with our eyes. They instead see the souls of those around them like shadows. Wraith constructs are not flesh and blood. They are the souls of the dead Aeldari warriors imprisoned in a Wraithbone body. Therefore, without a Spirit Seer around, Wraith constructs basically become mindless zombies, for lack of a better description. Spirit Seers are by definition basically necromancers. They command the reanimated dead, which is generally looked down upon by other Eldari, but since their populations are dwindling, they quite often have no choice but to field their dead as reinforcements. Shadow Seers. The final Eldari Psyker worth mentioning are the Shadow Seers. These are Harlequin Psykers that act as spiritual guides for the Harlequins, much in the manner that Warlocks and Farseers do for the citizens of the Craft Worlds. Shadow Seers cause illusions and enhance the plays and dances performed by the Harlequins in order to shock and amaze the audience. On the battlefield, Shadow Seers use their abilities to confuse and mislead the enemy, as well as causing fear and terror throughout enemy ranks. Most Shadow Seers sport a mini grenade launcher that releases narcotic gases that lower the enemy's inhibitions and allow the Shadow Seer to psychically manipulate them easier than it could without their narcotics. To stare into the face of a Shadow Seer is to see a disturbingly distorted vision of your future self, which will likely cause you to buckle in terror and run in fear. Orc Psykers. The next alien race we're going to discuss is nearly as old as the Eldari, and therefore demonstrate incredible psychic abilities, though they clearly not in control of their powers as the Eldari are. The race we're talking about is the Orcs. Orcs are extremely different than other sentient species. Each and every orc generates a psychic field, simply known as Wa energy. As an orc gets more excited and or angry, the energy field he emits becomes more and more powerful. Get a large group of orcs together and a flood of Wa energy will fill the surrounding area. Get these orcs worked up and thirsty for blood, and the power of the Wa can be overwhelming, to say the least. Orc Psykers are known as Weird Boys. This is likely due to the fact that the orcs find their constant headaches and complaining as weird and unorky. This doesn't stop the orcs from using these weird boys as weapons on the battlefield, though. Unlike the Psykers of other races, weird boys can't really control or focus their powers. The Wa energy generated by the warband simply builds and builds in the weird boy's mind. Think of it kind of like background noise. As that noise intensifies, the weird boy's headaches get worse and worse. This eventually accumulates to a point that the weird boy has to release this pent-up energy, or else cause his head, or even the head of other orc boys around him, to explode. This is generally referred to as a headbang. Hopefully, the weird boys can find a target to point this release of Wa energy at before such a thing can occur. Much in the manner that Primaris Psykers are veteran-sanctioned Psykers and Farseers are veteran Warlocks, a veteran weird boy is referred to as a Warphead. Warpheads are weird boys that have survived many battles and many near headbangs. They have become comfortable enough with their rather unique existence that instead of complaining about their headaches they get from the Wa energy, they actually begin to enjoy the pain. So much so that they will purposely seek large groups of orcs and or work with their warbands, working them up into a bigger frenzy in order to gather as much Wa energy as possible. The Warphead's mind has become so saturated in warp energy that they are incapable of integrating into orc society and remain as outcasts, traveling from warband to warband. But this is not always the case, and many successful war bosses will keep the Warpheads employed in order to exploit their abilities on the battlefield, or even to use them as spiritual advisors, which is rare, but happens. Something to point out that makes Orc Psykers different than other Psykers is that they don't seem to attract demons. There's been instances in the fluff of orcs turning to chaos, but there doesn't seem to be any instances of demonic possession, or really any demonic influence at all. At least not in the manner that humans and Eldari experience. We will discuss this in better detail when we get onto the topic of orc gods, but for now we're going to accept the fact that orcs do not create demons, and that is probably why demons can't really affect or infect an orc. Also, I suppose they are very simple-minded creatures, and so don't possess the fears and frailties that other races suffer from, since fear and frailty is generally what demons use to influence humans and Eldari. Tyranids Psykers. The final race I'd like to cover in this video is the Tyranids. The Tyranids are probably the most psychic race in the galaxy. Much like the Orcs and Eldari, technically every Tyranid creature is psychic in some way. Whereas the Orcs all generate psychic energy, and only weird boys can use it for psychic abilities, the Tyranids all share a psychic connection with one another. This allows the larger, more intelligent, and tactical creatures the ability to exercise control over the lesser creatures. The fact is that Tyranids all share a single hive mind. They produce what is called a shadow in the warp, which blocks many other races' psychic abilities, most notably the sight of Imperial navigators, which, as you can probably tell, can create a lot of problems for Imperial fleets traveling throughout the galaxy. Even though every Tyranid has a psychic connection to the hive mind, that doesn't make every Tyranid a psyker per se. There are certain breeds of Tyranids that are able to exercise what we traditionally know as psychic abilities, while others are simply a node for the hive mind to pass through, much like orders coming down a chain of command. There are many breeds of Tyranid organisms that we consider psykers in the traditional sense of the word. The first that comes to mind is the zoanthropes. Since the Tyranids devour all things on the planets they conquer, they utilize the genetic material absorbed by the hive to create more organisms for the hive. This does, however, mean that the Tyranid organisms will evolve to incorporate the new genetic material, and as a result take on some of the characteristics of the life forms they devour. The zoanthrope is theorized to be the result of Tyranids incorporating Eldari genes into their breeding pools. The immense psychic power that can be unleashed by these horrible creatures is remarkable, to say the least. You'll notice that zoanthropes have an enlarged cranium. In fact, a zoanthrope's psychic mind is so much the focus that the zoanthropes have tiny little bodies in comparison to their heads. A tiny body that they really have no need or use for. Zoanthropes even use their psychic abilities to float around instead of walking or crawling, making the fact that they have a body even more superfluous. Hive Tyrants. These are the generals, so to speak, of an invasion force. They are incredibly powerful psykers and act as a central node that the hive mind will utilize in order to command the hordes. Aside from just being a conduit for the Norn Queens, the Hive Tyrant is able to perform devastating psychic attacks and abilities on the battlefield. This makes the Hive Tyrant a force to be reckoned with, to say the least, being physically monstrous and intimidating, but also being powerful psykers. The psychic might of the Tyranids is nothing to scoff at. As was said prior, almost every Tyranid life form is psychic in some way, since they share a collective hive mind. An example of the Tyranid chain of command are Tyranid warriors. The Tyranid warriors are not exactly psykers, but they do act as nodes that the hive tyrant will use to command the lesser insectoids, much like officers would do for their general. This, of course, is done psychically, and even though this is so, the Tyranid warriors do not display the ability to make psychic attacks as such. They're simply a relay for the hive mind to help command the Gaunts and other lesser organisms. Genestealers. One of the important psychic aspects of the Tyranids is the anomaly that is the Genestealer. We'll go deeper into the hive mind and the brood mind in later content, but it's worth noting now that Genestealers don't require proximity to the hive mind in order to make decisions. They are fiercely independent creatures, and because of this, they make the perfect scouts for the fleets. They land on a planet in search of a life form to infect with their seed. Eventually, this allows the Genestealer to infiltrate the native populace, and the original Genestealer himself becomes more powerful as the cult grows, and more people become infected. Once a full-on Genestealer uprising is unleashed upon an Imperial world, the original Genestealer that caused the infection, now called a Patriarch, will be both psychically and physically more powerful than he was as a lone Genestealer. This makes the Genestealer an incredibly psychic breed, equating the Genestealer Patriarch to Farseer levels of psychic ability. Genestealer Magus. Since both Genestealers and humans are psychically potent races, when they combine into a hybrid it can produce some powerful Psykers, known within the Genestealer cults as the Cult Magus. To try and equate their level of power to something we understand already, the Magus is at about the same level as a Primaris Psyker, whereas the Patriarch is more of a Farseer level Psyker. The Cult Magi act as leaders in lieu of the Patriarch, and ensure that the followers of the cult do the Patriarch's bidding. They may also use their powers to persuade more to join the cult, or even to shield the cult from those who would wish to harm them through telepathy and other defensive abilities. That's all the subject matter I can cover today. I realize I left out a few Xenos races that exist within the fluff but don't have models in the game. I left them out because I wanted to cover the psychic races that are actually in the game. That being said, I'm sure you noticed there are Xenos races within the game that I didn't mention here either. That's because those races, like the Tau and the Necrons for example, don't really have Psykers, although the Ethereals are kind of questionable. Also, the Drukhari have psychic potential, but refuse to use psychic powers out of fear Slaanesh will swallow their soul, and probably rightfully so. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you learned something. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on Xenos Psykers. Let's get a conversation going, so make sure to hit me up in the comments below, and let's talk about this for a little bit. Also guys, if you like this video, please hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. We also don't make any money here off advertising, so if you guys want to support us, check out our Patreon campaign linked in the description below. There's a bunch of bonus perks on there for you, and it helps us out. But if being a monthly patron doesn't strike your fancy, then check out our Spreadshirt page. It's also in the description below, and buy yourself some sweet encounter Wargaming swag, and like I say, it just helps us out a little bit to keep the ball rolling. That's all for now, and we'll see you at our next encounter.
Like a monkey in a rocket on his way back home. Okay. Scratching his head.